Hi guys, and welcome to another video about my old sled. I thought today we'd have a conversation about buying a used snowmobile. You know, it wasn't that long ago that I bought my first sled, and I remember at the time I had no idea what I should even look for. So I thought I'd put together this video. Let's go outside, I'll show you the sled that I ended up buying, and I'll point out a few things that I think that you ought to look for when you're buying your first sled. Alright, so this is the machine that I ended up buying. This is a 1997 MXZ 670. It's made by Skidoo. And actually that's a good place to start. Let's talk about brands and manufacturers. Okay, so in terms of brand, if I leave this video up long enough, sooner or later somebody's going to post a comment that I don't like Skidoo, or I had a terrible experience with Polaris, or Arctic Cat sucks. Because people are fiercely loyal to brands, and you have to remember that companies work really hard to earn that loyalty, and it's quite often based on things nothing to do with the product at all. I mean, even somebody's logo or slogan can appeal to one person over another. Sometimes it's past experience. But the reality is that all of the manufacturers make a decent product. Arctic Cat, Polaris, Skidoo. I chose this particular make and model because my brother has a Skidoo. I like the look of it. I just like the Skidoo product, but you know, again, the reality is most of the manufacturers make a good product. I'm sure some of them will have a bad model or even a bad year. Ask around, right? Don't buy the first sled you see. Ask around, get some different opinions, and then make your own decision. So start with the basics. Just look down the side of the snowmobile. Does everything look straight? Especially things like the trailing arms, right? The front suspension components. Do they look straight? Or do they look like they've been bent from being in a collision? So you got to remember, these machines are meant to be driven very fast and in the snow. So, you know, it's quite common that people will collide with objects that are buried under the snow. And, you know, one of the big things that would be really hard to fix is if the tunnel or the frame gets bent. So this is one spot that you can look. Right down the side here, you'll see creases if the sled's been bent. Now you may see little things like this from where it's landed on something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the tunnel is bent. Again, you want to look for creases along the sides here. Now the other place that bends like that from a collision are going to show up are on the frame here. So right down inside here, you'll see there's a metal frame that the engine bolts into, and that's another place that those kind of creases and bends are going to show up if the sled's been in a collision. You know, like I said, general condition really goes a long way when you're looking at something used, and it's not an exact science. I mean, you can still get it home and, you know, the engine will blow on you in a week. There's no way to tell, but the more you look at it, the better impression you can have about how well it was looked after. So just look at general condition. How grungy and dirty it is this. Now for 1997, this isn't too bad. Yes, there's some rust on the pipes, and but the top end had just been rebuilt just before I bought it. So it's there's quite a few new gaskets and components and things like that. It was generally fairly clean. The guy took care of it. It wasn't absolutely filthy. The other thing you want to look at is the drive belt. Now, the drive belt is a part that wears out, right? It's meant to be changed. So, if you got an old dried belt and it's cracked, it doesn't mean you don't buy the sled. It's just, you know, think about that when you're making your offer, but you want to make sure that belt's in good shape. You want to check the sides of the clutch, the drive pulley and the driven pulley to make sure there's no weird wear patterns. See any, you know, if things are bent and they're not lined up properly, you can see marks and unusual wear patterns, so you want to watch for that. And you know, like I said, just general condition. The seat is another thing that puts a lot of people off. If you look at particularly an older machine like this, a lot of times the seats will be split. I mean, they're out in the elements. There's people putting their boots up on them, and quite often they'll be split. And this one actually was. It had a couple of splits in it. I mean, that's not the end of the world. I think it was about $150 to get a new seat cover for this. And it's not just cosmetic. You know, if you think if you're out on the trail and you're sitting on a piece of foam that's soaking wet, it gets pretty uncomfortable. So just keep that in mind, that you're probably going to want to replace that if it's ripped. Take a few minutes and inspect the track really well. You know, just look for general signs of wear, threads coming through, splits, cracks. Just what kind of condition is it in. It's a part that does wear out. It's meant to be replaced. You can think of it like the tires on your car.
But the difference is this, you know, this is an expensive component to replace, and it's a difficult one to replace. So you got to drop the suspension out of it. It's not as easy as putting a new tire on a car. You know, so if you spend $1,500 on a used snowmobile, you know, that quickly becomes an $1,800, $2,000 snowmobile when you add a few $100s on for a track.
Really get down here and give the rear suspension a good going over. Check all the idler wheels. Make sure they got all the rubbers on them. Make sure they're not loose. You know, check these sliders, the plastic sliders. Make sure they're not, you know, if they look worn or cracked. Again, that's a wearable part. It's meant to be replaced. And not, you know, horrendously expensive, but have a look at that. You know, check all the components, make sure there's no cracks, nothing's broken or loose. You know, obviously the ski is like the wheel on your car, so you want to make sure that, you know, it's in good shape, not cracked or broken anywhere. Underneath, you want to look at the carbides. Okay, the carbides are a metal piece underneath to keep the ski up off the road when you're crossing roads. It also helps you turn on a hard surface, so you just want to make sure that they're not too worn down. Again, it's a wear part, it's meant to be replaced, but it is a bit more expensive. This is one thing I actually forgot to do, and it came back to bite me. Take the time to check your gauges and make sure they're all working. My fuel gauge, I ended up having to take a little bit of time and fix that, so make sure all your gauges are working. I think with anything mechanical, it's a good idea to start it and hear it run before you buy it, unless the guy tells you that it's not running and you're just buying it for parts. Now, the one thing with the snowmobiles is once they get warmed up, they're a lot easier to start. So it's not a bad idea if you can ask the owner to leave it and not run it until you get there, so that you know that you know what it's like starting it from cold. Now again, every snowmobile is different. This one only has a pull start. You may want to electric start. I personally have never had any problems with it being a pull start. They are a bit of work to get running though. If you have trouble with your arms or your hands, you may want to make sure you get one with an electric start. But in any case, this one has a primer. It's you know, same idea as a choke. It needs a richer mixer to start, so you give it a few primes to start it. And then, you know, this particular sled, it takes me, you know, 5 or 6 if it's really, really cold. And it should only take me 1 or 2 pulls to start it, but it's not that hard. And then once it's warm, it's only a single pull and it'll start. And then you want to let it run for a while and make sure that you got a nice smooth idle. Hopefully the guy will let you take it for a little boot, even just around the yard, to make sure all of the everything in the gear case is working. Make sure the reverse gear engages if it has reverse. You really want reverse if you can get it. This machine is awfully heavy to lift up and turn around, so you know, I'd really think about that. You know, another topic, and it's actually a fairly hot topic for some people, is 2-stroke versus 4-stroke. There are some advantages and disadvantages to both. Now, the gap is narrowing quite a bit with the newer machines. But when you're looking at an older machine like this, 2-stroke versus 4-stroke didn't even come into my decision making. I just wanted to buy an older machine. I didn't want to spend a lot until I found out whether I liked it or not. And the machine that I got happened to be 2-stroke. More snowmobiles were 2-stroke than 4. Now, the advantages of a 2-stroke engine is a higher horsepower to weight ratio, so it's very light and very fast, better performance. They're a simpler motor. There's less moving parts, so some people would say they're easier to work on. They don't have valves, for example. Now, the disadvantages of a 2-stroke motor are cost of operation, for example. You have to buy fuel, but you also have to buy injector oil. Emissions, quite frankly, they stink, right? I mean, a 2-stroke motor smokes quite a bit more than a 4-stroke. Now, a 4-stroke, on the other hand, you know, the disadvantage is, again, they're heavier and they're more complex motor. They're harder for you to work on. Now, in terms of the weight, it's not as big a difference because the engineering of the overall machine is so much better now. Some of the advantages of a 4-stroke machine is economy. You don't have to buy injector oil. They get better fuel mileage. They burn cleaner. You don't get that smoke or that 2-stroke smell. You basically turn the key in and go. They're a lot easier, a lot less maintenance. So yeah, the newer machines have come a long way, and they still handle really well. So basically, especially if you're buying an older used sled, I wouldn't even worry about it too much. If you're going to have fun on the machine, go for it. You know, on the topic of emissions, remember if you're looking at a 2-stroke that they smoke. So because it's oil injected, So if you find that it's smoking quite a bit, don't worry about it too much. As a matter of fact, I would probably worry more if it wasn't smoking at all. I'd be concerned that it wasn't injecting oil. Okay guys, I think that's most of the things that I would want to look for if I was looking for another used snowmobile. I don't think anybody's going to think of every possible thing that you could check. My main piece of advice is be really thorough. Take the time to check things over. Take the time to ask a lot of questions, get a feel for how it was maintained and how it was used. Even a compression test is not a bad idea. It's a good indication of the state of the engine. Doesn't take a long time. You have to take some spark plugs out. I've done another video on how to do it. I remember reading a post recently about buying a snowmobile, and the poster had said, no seller is going to let you do all of those things. And, every seller is going to be different, in terms of how much time they're going to spend with you, whether they're going to let you ride the snowmobile or not. And you just kind of have to use your own judgment. Personally, I would want to check as much as I can before making a decision, before dropping a lot of money. Now, the other thing to remember, this may sound funny, but really think about the age of the machine. When you get old like me, a 97 actually seems like fairly new, given that I was in school in the 80s. But yeah, I looked at this, it was in fairly good shape. I didn't really think about how old it is, but what happened was when I got onto Skidoo's parts website and started looking for parts, to fix it up, a lot of the parts aren't available anymore. So if you're looking at a particular sled and you like it, then take that into account. Now the flip side of it is having an older sled. I get a classic sled permit for the trails, which is a little bit cheaper. But keep that in mind, how old the sled actually is, and can you get parts for it. The other thing you can do is a great source of information is the forums. There's a ton of snowmobile forums online, and snowmobile owners love to give advice and help you out. So jump online and start asking some questions. Really resist that urge to run out and grab the first sled you see, because you're running out of snow and it's February, like I did. Now, I did get lucky. I've had an awful lot of fun with this machine, and so far it's running great, and I have no complaints. But I got to admit I was in a bit of a hurry when I bought it. So I hope you found that helpful, and if you did, go ahead and hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.